The film you're about to see was made 50 years ago, and it was made by 4 amateur photographers. It is just as it came out of the cameras. According to Kodak, the film was only supposed to last 10 years. Well, here it is 50 years on, and it has lasted quite well. Taken by 4 amateur photographers. The first, part 1, was taken by Bill Tucker, my father, and myself, and part 2 was taken by Lionel Sims and his son Philip. This section, first little bit, is taken of the Renmark crew who challenged the rest of the state to represent South Australia in the King's Cup back in 1956. It was taken down on Snowdon's Beach. That's the crew at the finishing line, and they are well out in front. And there's the second crew. They beat them by about 2 lengths. Now the crew was the bow, which is up the front end of the boat, was Tracy Carr, followed by Paul Giles, Jimmy Fear, Don Eaton, Todd Edmonds, Terry Giles, John Pearce, Rod Edmonds was stroke. The cox was Bert Pilgrim. This is after the race. A lot of congratulations went on. Here we are back at the 56 flood, taken down at the end of Warrego Street. Scotty Anderson just going to the left, and also Stan Moss. They're filling their tractors with fuel, which was provided by the Renmark Irrigation Trust. This is picking up dirt by scoop, which we had to do because it was carted in by trailers. We had no way of getting up on the banks because at that particular time we'd have rain in the mornings were clear and rain in the afternoon. So the trailers were brought in. Trucks you couldn't get there because they would have got bogged. So they unloaded with shovels, carted up on the bank by Fergie tractors, and then tipped. Bob Mapey is the one picking up the handle then. As people who operated scoops, we got to know which were good scoops and which weren't good. Now this one nearest the camera wasn't the best. Going along the flood bank on Warrego Street. That's the return. As I said, we had showers of rain every afternoon. Because we couldn't work on the banks, we went home and pruned our properties. But you can see the water in behind the bank. And there are the gutters that the tractor wheels made. Jack Winder driving the tractor there on the left. And so we just went around circle after circle after circle, carting dirt up onto the banks. Stan Moss. Keithy Tamlin, an old resident of Renmark North. That's him there. He was he did his work, his share. The tractors you see with the covered in wheels, they came from up on the 60 foot, they were citrus growers, and they came down with their tractors and helped cart dirt up onto the banks. There's Keithy Tamlin, Steve Gasparic on the tractor, and so you'd tip your scoop of dirt and that would add another 3 or 4 inches to the height of the bank, and it was just a continual job. and it was always the shortest way home. So the first one that would go over the edge of the bank, then the rest would follow. But people were reluctant to be the first one. This is taken on the end of Calgoa Street, around Rex Mosel's property, around his house. As you can see, the bank was very close. And the term that we used, bogged to the udder. And so one Fergie got bogged, but the beauty of them was it only took another Fergie to pull them out. This is on the bottom end of Bert Smith's property, which again is on Calgoa Street. And this is pushing dirt up to the bank, but the biggest problem there was the ground was that saturated with rain that when you push the dirt up and the machine backed away, it pulled the dirt back with it. That was a D7, quite a good sized dozer in those days. This is down on Namoy Street, Ken Francis Street. His tractor there, Ron Conway, Ron Aston, quite a few of the locals in that street. They were carting dirt up onto the flood bank, and that seemed to be an area of international tractors. Ty Pedler with a leather cap on, shoveling dirt, just to make the bank that bit wider. This is out on the end of Nelbuck Street, on the creek end, in front of Rod and Mick Edmonds' property. Here's a scoop that wasn't very active, but this TD18 and carry-all got bogged, and they had to get the recovery unit out from Renmark, which was 2 Army recovery 6-wheel drive Mack trucks, and it was on dark when they recovered that one. Barry Lacey on his father's Fergie, and again bogged to the udder. But no worries, you found another tractor and pulled it out. Again back on Nelbuck Street, on the corner of 6th Street and Nelbuck Street, and that's putting dirt onto the bank. The Lands Department decided they didn't want water from RIT coming into the Lands Department area. So they organised this machinery to come and put a bank down Nelbuck Street. It was just over a half a mile, and it was called the Great Bank of Chaffee. And there was no rabbits. I think the rabbits were those who designed it. Here the dozer up on Windy Hill, up by where the old Chaffee Oval used to be, and that's pushing up dirt so that the front end loaders can pick it up and take it to the required areas. The government paid for be a half a dozen trucks and several loaders to cart this dirt to put this great wall of Chaffee down. Morning tea was made each day, and afternoon tea and lunch, and this trailer carted the water with a copper on the other side. Not on the trailer, but on the ground. And one of the local dogs. Here we are, the group of men putting in these stakes because we'd had just on lunchtime, and we'd had a windstorm come from the north, and it did happen to put water over the bank. Stewie Anderson was there to start with, loading dirt on Windy Hill, and the tractors that carted the dirt to the flood bank were those that couldn't run up and down on the flood bank. And as you can see, 2 loaders would come in and drop the dirt. It was a big trailer came in from up on the 60 foot, and they loaded 2 two front-end loaders dropped the dirt on the trailer and broke the back of the trailer, and she was in two halves. Put Glenn Manning with a dark coat on, Eric Holliday, Peterson, Ken Peterson, and I've forgotten the other chap, Koschel, Clem Koschel there. Clearing the site for this great wall of chafing. Along Nelbuck Street, well, they had to clear the land, and this dozer here working, clearing out some domestic trees, if you like, in front of Dave Kidd's property. Dave Mack is the chap on the ground waving his arms. He represented the Lands Department. Here's one of the morning teas. Gene McKinnon, Bill Sloydie in the background with a dark shirt, and Ron Pank's wife. The Public Works Building Department sent machines from Woomera with that mechanical shovel there, loading trucks. There was 5 trucks, these Dodge trucks came down from Woomera to build this great wall of chafing. Well, when they got to the main intersection from Nelbuck Street, somebody was there and they'd divert them down to our flood banks. So consequently we got dirt at times in a bit of a hurry. But it was a lot quicker than tractors and trailers. That overloader was owned by Dickie Lindner, and again this is up on Windy Hill. Pushing up dirt with a D7. The weather wasn't the best for taking films in those days, as we'd get cloudy, overcast days and we didn't quite get the right sunlight for best filming. But you've got to take them when they're available. This is putting points on the end of mallee sticks that somebody had been out and cut. That's myself there in overalls, and McPherson from Coulton with his saw bench and tractor. Here we have a tractor that sat aside the flood bank. Ken Peterson with his backside towards us. A lot of discussion how to get it off, because you're sitting up on a bank, how would you retrieve it? Taken in at the hospital after the bank broke there. The films aren't in perfect order, as it took around about 20 of these little spools to make up the film, and they haven't been put in the correct order. Now, I believe that was the nurses' quarters, but this is going back 50 years, and the hospital doesn't look greatly like that today. Rowrell Avenue, looking from just outside the hospital gates back into Renmark. This is the days before we had dual carriageway through the town. And coming around the houses on Rowrell Avenue, facing Rowrell Avenue in the Hale Street area, opposite the hospital. One of the houses of Taylors. And then we ventured in to the oval. Well, you could have played water polo. This is one of the homes on, I can't remember the name of the little street running into the oval, or the oval gates. The Tintra Tennis Club, the Wood Pavilion. I'm in a boat here, tin boat, 12 feet long, two of us, and we strapped a tractor tube on the front of it in case we ran into difficulties. The Tennis Club rooms, clubhouse. Coming around to the scoreboard. Now that's disappeared. The cycle track there around the oval. And the water going over the Railrail Avenue. Preparing to put down sandbags again around the hospital. This is before, of course, the flood bank broke and it's out of sequence. The main entrance of the hospital doesn't really look like that today. That's Rex Elliott, who had a property out by the Chafee pump, and they were trying to protect the hospital area with a wheelbarrow. Of course, they had no hope. Again, after the floodwaters went through, they had stacks of sandbags ready for emergencies. This is taken there by the Growers Distillery, and it used to be the old Caratel. That didn't go under. That's Sam Pitt. Ken Pitt's wife, looking at the damage around her home down the Crescent area. There's another shot of this house a little later on when the waters went through. That's Ken Pitt's wife. She's still alive in Renmark. This is taken further down the Crescent area, because the Crescent area bank broke and the area finished up with anywhere 2 to 4 feet of water. Carl Strutz was a butcher in Renmark, and that was his slaughter yards down the Crescent area. Here we are back at the Growers Distillery Bridge with the traffic coming across. It was the only road bridge left to get in and out of Renmark. They stopped the traffic one night and laid sheets of steel over the decking and then added another 18 inches of soil to it. They were frightened that the vehicles would go through with the water and that rotting the timbers underneath. In the Ango winery area, where Ango's had a break in their bank, but with the cash crew and their own employees, they managed to save the premises, but they did end up with about a foot of water through it. It's the main office, and that's still there today. This is down again on Calgoa Street, Bert Smith's property, with his coal dip and his drying racks. Drying, that sounds a funny word, with the water, and there's a rack in the distance with an iron roof on it. Loading dirt on Windy Hill for the Great Wall of Chaffee. Again, it turns out much nicer when you've got plenty of light. It was one of the better days we had. We have Vera Winder facing us, Margaret Lacey, Tommy Loveday's wife, and Ron Pank's wife. George Bryan with the welder, Phil McKinnon next to him, and this was in the bow shed at the Chaffee Oval, where maintenance and general repairs were done to tractors, scoops, chains, anything that needed repairing. In by the Renmark wharf, river grows on the backside on the right hand side. Here we are filling sandbags. They made a big stock of sandbags there, so if anywhere that there was a break or likely to be a break, they could load them up very quickly and run them around the town to put in the necessary holes that were where water was coming through. This is out at the Chaffee Oval, and there's three Caterpillar tractors there working, two D7s and a D6. There was a break around the back of the oval that nobody noticed overnight, and these tractors came down and, or these dozers came down and filled in the gap. Merv Gerswich is in that one there now. He was a grower out at Coultong on a D6. This is taken along Goolwa Street, Fred Burr's property on the corner of Goolwa and Rail Avenue, looking over to the high school house. The Environment Centre was there in the middle now, and some of the buildings at the high school. The water tower in the background of the town. The high school flood bank broke overnight, and this was the consequences of it. Frank Trigg ran a business from there, and that's Arch Grosvenor and Ron Trigg, his son. This is taken with an army duck came in to rescue some of the equipment and things out of the school. The students were then bused to Glossop, to the Glossop High. There's a rotary hoe that didn't make it. And this is Sid Burr's property opposite, on the other side of the road to the high school. It's now owned by Katsaris. Back around Hamber's Corner, with the State Bank and the Commonwealth Bank, looking out Railroad Avenue towards the hospital area. That chap there was, Jack Winder was there in that photograph. Merv Gerswich again on his little D6. Ken Peterson on the bank. And Jack Winder in the leather coat. Growers around Chaffey and Coulton. Back at the Renmark Wharf area, the old fire station in the background, no longer there, and getting onto the Hambers Corner. That was the wharf before the peak. And Johnny Anspatch's fishing boat. He was a professional fisherman. Sturt Memorial. That's what remained of the Women's Bowling Club, and where that clubhouse is about where the tourist office is now. Through the hotel lawns, hotel gardens it were, very nice gardens in those days. And looking up over the men's bowling green, and they didn't get flooded. I wonder why. And Murray Avenue. Looking downstream towards Sonneman's from the hotel area. The Renmark Hotel. That was the flood bank at the back of River Grower's store. It went straight through the building. Tom Forbes's boat, the Daphne, and it came out the other side and went behind the Bank of New South Wales, which is Westpac now. The fire station. One of Schwarzkopf's trucks that went down a hole and it shouldn't have. And with the help of another machine, out it comes. Fred Burr's property, when the high school bank went, that shed's still standing today. And the high school headmaster's house. And the back view of Fred Burr's house, which is still there. RITX. That used to be what they called the high school shop. That went under. Now this is on a Rumper Street, because when the flood bank went at the high school, they hurriedly put up a bank along a Rumper Street, and that went the full length of Rumper Street through to the cemetery, and then back on to 21st Street, Cucamonga, and then 21st. This is on the corner of 21st, Bookmark Avenue and Cucamonga. Huck Stepp's house. And the little house on Cucamonga Street, I believe that burnt down a few years ago. An army duct. They'd rescued some gear out of the high school. That's Pod Palmer. There's been 3 or 4 chaps called Pod Palmer in Renmark. And this is down the Crescent area at the old Crescent Hall, which is now not there. And in the background is John Brand's house. When the Baxendale bank went, it flooded the bottom half of the Crescent area. Some of the homes along Morna Street. This is a side view of which is now Ruston's Gardens. And this is Pitt's property 50 years ago with their citrus and their big Moreton Bay fig. Well, the citrus didn't like the water and they died, but the fig flourished on it. That was Ted James's car that didn't get out, and that was Pitt's home. Pitt's a relation of ours, so my father and I went and took the liberty and went and had a look there. Sam Pitt, and rescuing a saw blade off a saw bench. Taken inside the house in the main passage, but as you can see, it didn't turn out. But there's a boat coming to rescue me. Sorry, to rescue my father. That is me. That's Bill Tucker there on the end of the shovel, hoping to do some good. And Pitt's garage where they house their car. I had the good fortune to get onto an electric outboard motor. They're quite popular now, but they weren't in those days. This is Rob Knight's house, belonged to his father at the time. Hadn't that been that many years built. And Knight's a pear patch. That was the house that they dozed around to get dirt to push up to the banks. Well, the effort was in vain. John Brand's house at the peak of the flood. And here it is after the water went down. It wasn't the best smelling area, as you can imagine, with all the rotting vegetation. This is taken after the flood went down, and they had these Fordson tractors with these water harvesters which lifted big volumes of water only up a few feet. Had like a big worm through the middle of that casing, because the water didn't all drain back to the river. Sam Pitt and his daughter Marilyn. Marilyn lives in the Berry Glossop area. That house we saw earlier on. This was down at Pitt's property with the citrus. Consequently, they didn't survive. Brian Pitt, who lives down on part of the Pitt's property, the Crescent. Sam Pitt with a not so nice looking citrus tree, and that was a peach tree, and they're shaking off the little peaches that did form. This is on Railrail Avenue when the bridge collapsed across the feed channel. This bridge, original design, I believe, was made to go up in the mid-north in the Stony country. And they decided to, the same design bridge to put in here in Renmark on a clay base. Consequently, something collapsed. My father had the opportunity to go down to Overland Corner, and that's the water down there. And at the bottom of the film, the screen, you can just see Overland Corner Homestead, or hotel at least. Back at the Renmark wharf area, a lot of talking going on with the locals. Some of the sandbagging done in front of the State Bank, the Sturt Memorial. This is again before the peak. The spools aren't in sequence, worse luck. In goes chimney. One of Van Gogh's trucks disappearing. And that's the Growers Distillery Bridge. Trike going along the railway line, and the Carotel. This is back on Nilbuck Street area again. Rod Edmonds' house. And looking down what we call the top end cattle yards on Nilbuck Street. And that was Perce Morris' house. He was marooned, and that was the little house. This is working out by the Chaffey pump before the peak, and they had a dozer and carryall bog there. They didn't get the recovery unit out. They enlisted the help of another dozer who came along and pushed on the back end of the carryall and got the machine out. That was Buller Shattuck, the watermaster from Chaffey. Looking from the hospital back into the town, Railrail Avenue, and the little bridge between the town and the hospital collapsed, and they put in a Bailey Bridge there overnight. The substation out on Railrail Avenue, out where the first blocks are, looking back over the bridge on Railrail Avenue that collapsed. That's Murray Dyer as the river was coming up before the peak. looking down towards Solomon's. And the hotel had their own little landing there. Joe Brettle's house, Railroad Avenue. Hospital from another direction. Now I think that is George Jennings' house. This again is after the flood had gone down. Or going down, I should say. Hale Street area. Back on the flood bank in Renmark North, Stewie Anderson, a grower on Nelbuck Street. Jimmy Snooks. This is down by Len Moss's property. Stan Moss. Jimmy Snooks again. Bob Maybe and myself. I did do some work there on the flood bank. Stewie Anderson. That's Bob on the end of the scoop. Now Bill Egg from up on the 60 foot. We got to know which were good scoops to tip and which weren't. And if they weren't a good one, the two of us would do it. Scotty Anderson, he was in charge of fuel. He was an uncle of mine, Scotsman. Terry Giles there unloading dirt in the overalls. And back up on Windy Hill, and that's Jim Pethick. His tractor and trailer. Not all tractors could get up on the bank, and he had a Fordson Major, and that's he there, and he carted dirt from Windy Hill down to whichever section required it at the time. Back at the Renmark Wharf before the peak. And that's Johnny Anspatch and Mum Wilson. They were professional fishermen. Back around at Rex Mosel's property. And Bert Smith, down the end of Calgoa Street, he had a net in, illegal of course, only way to catch fish, and he got himself a few feeds of callop. Again, trying to push dirt up against the bank, but it followed you back. It was that muddy and sticky. Back around Angos, that sign says dry weather road. Well, the weather was dry, but the ground was very wet. That's at Moray Park Corner railway crossing, and that was the train that went from Paringa to Renmark and Renmark to Paringa. Back at the fire station area, the old wharf area, which is gone now, a couple of years ago, was dismantled. Forbes's boat, looking down towards the hotel, the bowling greens. "30 feet all out." Now that's looking up towards number 1 pump and the water towers. just general sights there is at 30 feet. Now this chap, I believe, ran hoopers in Renmark, the furniture people, and that's in the grounds of the Renmark Club. There's Johnny Anspach and Mum Wilson. They were professional fishermen, and of course the right person's on the end of the oars. Unloading dirt in the town area. I believe that's somebody wood. Around the bowling greens. One of Dyer's trucks, dragging dirt off, was quicker than the shovel. In those days there weren't many tip trucks in the town. That's Murray Dyer again on one of their semi-trailers. Eventually that trailer was banned from coming into Renmark because they thought the Growers Distillery Bridge wouldn't stand the weight. You can see the seepage in around that house. This again is before the peak, and that's one of the locks of Renmark. Again, it looks like we're back at the peak. Hamber's Corner, where if it rained as it did most afternoons, what do you do with the water that collects in the street? So it was then pumped back over the flood bank into the river. This is there at the State Bank. The pipe that would have put the water back out of the town. That's Barry Lacey. And the side of River Growers Packing Shed store. You can see where the flood bank went in one side and it came out the other behind the Bank of New South Wales. Tom Forbes's boat. That's one of the army ducks. It was in Renmark to help evacuate areas. Barry and I did a trip down the river in front of Renmark, and you can see there that's the industry 50 years ago. And behind it was Bill Douglas's boat. He lived on that boat. Now big Bill Douglas living on the boat, each morning he would get up with his tape measure and measure from the side of the boat down to the water, and he was convinced there was no flood. The river never rose. The old rowing shed, you can see a tractor working in the background, and there's the State Bank with the sandbagging. The Sturt Memorial's in there. The rowing shed again. There's the white posts of the wharf. Of course the wharf's been reconstructed now. The old State Bank. A new building's gone up since. Amber's in the background. the Ozone Theatre, and the right-hand side is the Renmark Club. That's a totally different looking building now. But after 50 years, we all look a little different. You can see the tube in the foreground of the film. That's we had it tied to the front of our tin boat, just in case emergency happened. The hotel had a wonderful garden display there, but the 56 flood ruined it. The ladies' bowling green, that's about the site of where the tourist office is now. Sayers' house, but now that belongs to Mrs. Wilkinson, there by the rowing shed. You can see the height of the sandbags. Renmark on a very busy Saturday morning during the peak of the flood. On your right hand side is your Dunder Farmers, Clark's, of course motor cars that are 50 years older. And the entrance to the post office, they'd sandbagged around that just in case the banks went. And the lawns down through the centre of the town, they were stacked with sandbags in case of emergencies. This is out at the bottom of Cowpram Hill, where most of the dirt for the town of Renmark came from, and plus other banks around the town. And this was called a traxtigator. And that put 3 yards of dirt at a time, which 2 bucketfuls was a truckload. As you can see by the speed of the vehicle, it's not very fast, but it didn't take long to put 2 bucketfuls on a truck. The machine is basically a D7 bulldozer. A very gentle operated machine. This is another shot taken out at the Chaffey Oval area when the water came back around the back of the oval and it was missed. Merv Gerswich on the little machine on the left hand side. They were 2 D7s and a D6. And there's Merv there, a grower from Coulton. Taken on Nelbuck Street, the Great Wall of China, if you like, but we crossed out China and put Chaffey. This bank was built to stop the water from RIT area getting into the Lands Department area. It was a great bank, cost a lot of money, designed by politicians, and never saw water. It was about 20 feet wide at the base, 12 feet wide at the top, and about 5 to 6 feet high. This is looking from my property, or our property, at the bank along Nelbuck Street. This is Pitt's property down the Crescent. The big Moreton Bay fig in the background on the right. My father and I took the little tin boat and went down and got some shots of areas that were flooded. That was Pitt's garage with about 2 feet, 2'6" of water through it. Driving up the driveway. This is just after the peak. That's taken by Pitt's Gate looking south. And that's a car belonging to Teddy James. It didn't make it. And the logs and things that have floated. And that's a side view of Ted's house down the Crescent area. Now we're back in the town on Murray Avenue, down towards Sonneman's. This is carting the dirt away from the Great Wall of Chaffey. About 2 years later, they decided to shift it after a lot of complaints. And this is one of the tawny pools that were used to remove the dirt. And they had a D7 in front with a big hook that came out the back underneath the front of the tawny pool and pulled it along so it could load the dirt. Generally speaking, they weren't powerful enough to load themselves, but along the road they were very fast for the amount of dirt that they carried. That's the rise there on the corner of 7th Street and Tom Hendrick's block on the left-hand side. Doug Tamlin owned the property on the right.
This is water going under the Distillery Bridge on Renmark Avenue, very close to the base of the bridge. And that sign out there says dry weather road only. That's Ango's in the background. Still looking across that area there, looking more towards Ango's now. That was a place called the Carotel, which was a motelish type place over the road from Renmark. This is the flood bank which now stands alongside of the Jehovah's Witness spot on railroad. This is Cowra Street looking from the town, and that is the hospital in the background. More of Cowra Street. And looking from our house in 52 12th Street, looking across the Cowra Street flood bank to the hospital. And this is out in the Renmark Oval. There's the grandstand, the house of George Jennings, and this is the day the water went over the Railroad Avenue, although that part of Railroad Avenue is all flooded, and these are houses in Hale Street. This flood bank is around Gilly Taylor's house. These are more of the houses in Hale Street. And that's the W.E. Wood Pavilion, and this is the show hall. There's the grandstand at the Oval. More of the Oval. And Ron Rosenberg, Wolf, Chittleborough. These are the cars that were caught when the bridge that was between the town and the hospital collapsed. The army had to put up a bailey bridge. This is the Renmark Hotel Gardens. More of the hotel gardens. This is that was the flood bank down by Angos. And this goes through Goddard's property, which is down there adjacent to Angos. So Elizabeth Angove and their boat in the background and their boathouse, which was a bit full for the boat to fit in. This is back to the Renmark Hotel Gardens. Now this is on the Renmark Avenue bridge by the winery. As you can see, the floods are sort of lapping the road there, although we did have a lot of rain that year. And this is out at just beyond 28th Street, where bulldozers were loading trucks to bring sand in, soil, not sand, into the flood banks in Renmark. This Caterpillar loader was owned by Truran, who many years ago was a resident in Renmark. He had a big business in Adelaide doing this sort of thing, and one of his bulldozers for the business. This is the flood bank by the Distillery Bridge. This is driving across and turning across the railway crossing. The railway line held the floodwater out, and we had to go over by the this is Bill Sleeman getting ready to go out to the Renmark Hospital. Some of the doors at the hospital. Reg Wheeler, Jeff Turner. Going from the hospital back to town. The house of George Jennings, and looking along Rowell Avenue to the town. And that's looking from out in the Hammond's paddock across Cara Street over the flood bank onto the houses. And that's Cyril Lang, whose boat it was. This is Hamber's Corner, or maybe then might have been Sayers' Corner. These are the flood bags that were as a depot in the main street. This is a pump that was around by the rowing club, and these are the gardens in front of the State Bank. And looking across from the State Bank over to the island on the other side. That was the gauge that was used because the 56 floods went over the top of the town gauge. This is the flood bank down 27th Street. During those times, Adelaide sent flights up because people wanted to see what the flood looked like from the air. This is the flood bank around Angos that was. This is the Renmark High School. There it is. The headmaster's residence, and looking from the high school into town, that's what Rowell Avenue is like. This was the drain along Rowell Avenue. Now this is the water flowing, and that's Huckstep's house in the corner of 21st Street, and that is 21st Street across there. This was Wiedenhofer's house at the time, which is now Matchell's. This is back to the Renmark Hospital. Now on this occasion the boat is going out to open the gates at the electricity substation so that they could get in a hurry if they had to. So they were all, the gates were open even though there was water in there. That's the Rowell Bridge, the only thing left standing out there, and the road was all well underwater. Back to the Renmark Hospital again. The army had a duck here, and they took all of the ladies who had been volunteering, serving meals on a boat trip, and that was the organiser. This is going down 21st Street, sorry, down the Crescent. These are the houses down the Crescent. This is our lane in 12th Street. The seepage was just coming up there all the time without running out. Now going on the train from Renmark to Paringa. You can see this is going across the Paringa Bridge. And this is Paringa from the train. The Education Department had a temporary school over there. And this train I'm travelling on here is going to Tailem Bend. I went down there to stay with my uncle who lived at Jervois. This is still looking across from the train to Paringa, down in the area there. Now this is down at in the Lower Murray, the Jervois area. You can see here where the river normally would be. It would be between the rows of willow trees on the right, and all of the cattle areas have been flooded, and nothing was available there. All of the cattle were put up on the highlands for the duration of the flood. That is the Jervois pump, which traditionally pumped water out of the Jervois flats. And here is a dairy at Jervois, which is not quite flooded, but very close to it. Once more, that's more of Jervois. This is Barmera Cobdogla area. I'm never quite sure of this that Lionel had taken these photographs while he was down there. And probably the Cobdogla Oval. Now this is back in Rowell Avenue. And there's all those sandbags ready to be taken anywhere, wherever they might be needed. There's the old Renmark post office, the old state bank, and the new then council offices. And that bank there is the bank around the wharf area. There's the wharf. Once again, the hotel gardens. And my sister Helen was standing there. More of the hotel gardens, but going to the right we'll gradually come across the bowling club, which was over there. All of their chairs and things outside on the veranda. Looking from the hotel, there's the hotel with the bank in front of it. These are oranges down by Angos. Now this is the once again the bridge at the Renmark. There's Renmark in the background. This is the irrigation trust's siphon to siphon water into the number 3 pump, because the number 3 pump would have been flooded, but they used to have a person there who used to turn one or more siphons on depending on how the water's being pumped, so that the water wouldn't rise too much in it. There are Angos tanks. That's more of the banks around Angos. And this is a little duck thing that one of the Linders had. That's the bank around the Caratel. This is the Renmark High School gates. And there I am on a boat going out with a local fisherman, Ken Corston, who was going in there. I went in there to get my woodwork model, which was still in the woodwork centre. Here I am bringing it out, but 50 years on it's still not finished. Here's the main entrance to the hospital. Flood's receding now, but leaving the lovely mess that it did. And this is after the flood. The rail bridge had collapsed as a result of the flood. Interesting the way it was built with all those little skinny legs on it. It would have had to have taken a lot of heavy traffic in its time. And that's the 1956 flood as Lionel and I saw it.